recognize those members of the board who are here from the Friends of the History Center. Some of them are around and some of them are inside. So these are the people that keep the center going, that create the exhibits that you see. Our chairman for this exhibit has been Leah Olivia. Where are you? There you are. Okay, please give her a big hand. Coordinating something like this takes some tremendous effort, and we really appreciate it. You want to say anything from your seat? Okay, and her husband Ed is doing our filming for us. Her son helped set up, and we appreciate all that. We also appreciate Russ, who's with the Pathways, who helped set up all of our events, and we appreciate that Pathway support. Out here in the way of officials, we've got Mayor Rios. I know I saw him earlier. Thank you, Mayor Rockport. And we've got Dr. Castellan, Commissioner. You want to wave for us? Other officials that I didn't happen to see in the crowd. Okay. I'm so Judge Diana McGinnis. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you back there behind the sunglasses. Diana McGinnis, our county judge. Our county judge. So this morning we're really privileged to have a person with us today who can speak on a lot of issues. We have Judge Barbara Canales, who was elected judge in 2018. She was born in Corpus Christi and has a rich background in this area. She was valedictorian of her class at Ray High School, earned her degrees at UT Austin and Houston School of Law. She's been co-owner of an exploration company and practiced law until she was elected judge. Mother of 5 and active in the community. She's been invited here today to really talk about her ancestors and the rich heritage that we have here in this area, which is why we put this exhibit together in the first place. So we're very delighted to welcome Barbara Canales.
Thank you so much for having me on such a beautiful Saturday morning. I want you to know that normally I would be dressed, Mayor, in proper Rockport boating attire. Unfortunately, it's also the Junior Livestock Show. And so I will be heading back. We're having an incredible event called the All-Star Show. So if you feel like wandering around South Texas, we invite you there as well. But what a privilege it is this morning to be here. And my goodness, upon incredible reflection on the drive over, I said they must remember how important and significant today is for our family. And that's why they chose January 11th. And so when I walked in and I saw Leah, I said, I guess you chose this day purposefully. And I could tell by her expression, she did not. And so let me share with you why it is not only a beautiful morning in climate, but for me, a personal beautiful morning. Today, as I embark in telling you a little bit about my family, is my grandmother's birthday. Dr. Cleo Garcia was born on January 11th, 1917. Now, the truth is, if she were here, I'd have to probably really probe, because we all thought she was born on the 9th, but she didn't want to be born the same day as Richard Nixon. So we think she changed it. And if you knew La Doctora, that was exactly her line. And that would have been very fitting for her. My grandmother was affectionately known throughout South Texas as La Doctora. And the truth is while I'd like to share with you a little bit about many of my ancestors today, I have to say that it was my grandmother Cleo who really, in most ways, I identify with, I idolized, I admired. I feel her with me every day. And today is no exception. In fact, today is more perfect. You see, like all of you, she loved history. She lived and breathed it. She wrote 5 different books on Texas history. In fact, our own Spanish Texas Tejano history. She was Ancestry.com before there was one. She was a true genealogist. For those of you that do have a Hispanic surname, to this day, you can still go to the Corpus Christi Public Library and take your surname and do a record search. Google has made that also quite possible. But 25, 35 years ago, she was on the cutting edge of understanding that no matter who you were, no matter what your age or background, there is always a deep desire to come home. Home both metaphorically and physically. She knew that everybody had a burning desire to understand who they were, to understand why maybe they wound up in the place that they called home today. For me, she instilled a love of my ancestry from a very, very young age. In fact, I tell everybody, her house was like going on a perpetual treasure hunt through history. In fact, in my own jewelry box, just last week, I opened a small leather pouch looking for something else, and I found a Spanish galleon, an antorcha, one that she had given me that I had found in a drawer that she had. And that was very common for her. She was a collector of stamps, she was a collector of coins, she was a collector of books. She had so many passions, but they all revolved back to trying to understand her own ancestry and her own history, and it was very rich. Like the exhibit that you have here shown with the Canary Islanders, our people came from the southern part of Spain. And on the way over, and I didn't know what kind of forum I would be in. I didn't know I would be, as they say, up here. But I brought a notebook, and I think I'll leave it here, and so that you guys can peruse. I'll add it to the table and pick it up later. But it was one of many, many notebooks, and it shows a history of my grandmother, her 7 brothers and sisters, 6 of whom became medical doctors, all here in the area. Most of you are most familiar with her older brother, Dr. Hector P. Garcia. You not only have the Justice for My People documentary that was done by PBS, but you have an incredible display of many of the photographs and one telegram, important telegram, that you have posted. And it's really that telegram that sort of started it all. You see, my grandmother's parents were professors in Mexico. And during the revolution, there was so much bloodshed in what we now recognize as the northern part of Mexico, the Tamaulipas area, that my grandparents, who were professors, sought a more peaceful way of life, like so many of us do. They, like other immigrants today, crossed the border in search of asylum. They crossed the Rio Grande, and they settled in a small town called Mercedes, Texas, where my great-grandfather, in Spanish we call that bisabuelo, he set up a mercantile store, and he was a merchant. It was a good life until the Depression. And my grandmother and her brothers and sisters were highly educated, again, because her parents having come from Mexico. And they embarked on a quest to make sure all of their children became highly educated. Think about this back in the 1920s, late 1920s. Very highly unusual, if you will, in such an impoverished area at the time was for Hispanics to go to college. They started at the community college, but Dr. Hector had an older brother. His name was Dr. J.A., Jose Antonio. Actually, my father is also Jose Antonio, named after their grandfather and then the oldest brother. I told you they were professors. He had a fascination with history. Weird. I guess it is in the DNA. He named most of his children either after Aztec warriors or figures in Greek mythology. And so there was Dr. Hector, of course, after the great Trojan, but there was also Dr. Cuitlahuac, Dr. Xicotencatl, and Dr. Cuauhtemoc. God, I'm so glad I just got Barbara. I think she wanted to name me Carlota after a queen, but it didn't work out. But somehow, Barbara Ann song. That's good for the 60s. But it gives you a perspective on who they were, that my great-grandfather would name his children, except for the oldest, the namesake, right? As was custom in the traditional Spanish way to name your oldest child after you, and there was Jose Antonio's going back many, many generations. But then that the rest would have these Aztec warrior names, a reference to their own history. And then, of course, the educated side of him, the intellectual side, to the Greeks. And so it was no great surprise that Dr. Hector went to the University of Texas, and also to the University of Texas Medical School. After he graduated, there was very few opportunities for young Hispanic doctors to receive their residency. In fact, Texas wouldn't have them. And so he went to Nebraska to get his residency. By that time, World War II had begun in a way that we had not begun participation, but that Europe was already forming. And so when he got called up, even though he was a medical doctor with training, he did not go in with a rank of captain or as an officer. And it wasn't until Dr. Hector got through North Africa, when there was a terrific battle and lots of blood spilled, that he was helping other soldiers in a medical way. They curiously and scolded him to get away from this private, and then he announced he was a doctor, and they were in shock. He was quickly given a change of rank, and he did finish the war with the officer's rank. Dr. Hector came home, I think probably like most GIs, thrilled to be home in one piece. He also came home in love. He had met my Aunt Wanda in Napoli, and she was actually from Udine, but he had met her in Naples, I think, at the university. And he came home optimistic, but then soon became disillusioned because of the unbelievable prejudice and bigotry that he saw and experienced here in his home. And he had fought honorably for his country and fought side by side with so many different soldiers of all different backgrounds and ethnicities. And so it was heavy on his heart. But as a medical doctor, he was considered a figure, an authority figure. And so it was no surprise that after he began his practice, that he became an activist. And my grandmother, Dr. Cleo, who was on his heels after she had to patiently wait, because they had to go one at a turn, because they were not wealthy, they were a poor family. Everybody had to wait. Dr. J.A. went first, then Dr. Hector got to go. When Dr. J.A. finished medical school, then Dr. Cleo got to go after Dr. Hector finished. And so on and so on. And so as this activism rose within him, my grandmother was at his side. This might surprise you, but Dr. Hector had no grandchildren living. No grandchildren. He had 4 children, 3 of whom survived him, and none of them had children. So I am one of the oldest, not the oldest, but in Corpus Christi, the closest relationship to a grandchild. And so therefore, there's always this misperception that I'm his grandchild, but I was his niece, great niece. But he raised my father. My grandmother divorced when my dad was very young, and so Dr. Hector became his father. And so, sadly, Dr. Hector's son, Hector, died when he was 14 years old in a strange freak accident in Mexico City. And my father became his boy. And so in many of the photos, when you look at Justice for My People in this documentary, you will see my young father highly influenced by this great man. Can you imagine how amazing it must have been to have this strong female woman, mother, doctor, activist, and then your de facto father being Dr. Hector? It is absolutely, perfectly, organizationally logical in my mind why I became who I became, why I was influenced the way I was influenced from these, just, as I say, to so many groups, because I lived inside the redwood forest full of giants. There was not one. There were so many of them. It was hard to know which way to go. Let me backtrack. In 1948, Dr. Hector was a medical doctor, and he had already seen the pangs of poverty, discrimination, the colonias, a lot of sadness. And he focused his efforts where doctors normally do in the humanitarian way, but he gathered a group probably not too much larger than this with these words: Atención, atención. There will be a group meeting at Lamar Elementary. And he gathered the people that he knew thought like him, that were veterans, and they gathered and they formed a group that still exists today called the American GI Forum, whose purpose was really not necessarily to benefit Hispanics, although it gravitated so. It was to benefit the GI. It was to fight for veterans. You see, until the day my Uncle Hector died, he loved that flag. He loved his country. Today, no matter what I think about any policy, the attention that I give to the Pledge of Allegiance in my life, in my courtroom, is because of Dr. Hector. He had this sacred way of saying the pledge. If you didn't understand every word, he would be very angry with you. And that's why the PBS documentary and Justice for All, Justice for My People, is so significant to me. I told you this day was important, and I thought you had done it for two reasons. I thought maybe you had seen La Doctora's birthday. But then I thought, no, it wasn't about Grandma Cleo. It was because on January 11th, 1949, 71 years ago, probably about this hour, Dr. Hector, remember only 1 year having formed the GI Forum, called his friend, Lyndon Baines Johnson, and recounted in a telegram by Western Union. It was a letter to Lyndon Johnson that he sent, and then Lyndon sent a Western Union telegram back, which you have recorded here for all to see, that there was a private by the name of Felix Longoria who was being denied proper burial in Three Rivers, Texas. Lyndon and my uncle had formed a friendship that would last until the day the president died himself. It set Dr. Hector on a path that I'm still feeling the ripple effects today of. Dr. Hector not only befriended Lyndon, but Lyndon relied on Dr. Hector in so many ways. Dr. Hector formed the first Viva Kennedy clubs. Dr. Hector served on the very first board of the Aged, which turned into what we all know as Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. Dr. Hector sat on the very first civil rights forum that was called by any White House. Interestingly, he did not know Dr. Martin Luther King only by telegrams. How different the world would have been, perhaps, if we had had flip phones or social media, or can you imagine the conversations they would have had? And although Cesar Chavez is on the names of so many signs over major highways everywhere, Dr. Hector was marching for union farm workers along with my grandmother a decade before Cesar. They weren't just pioneers. They almost had premonition of how to know how to stand up for what was right. They were incredible icons for our community, and yet they never held elected office. My grandmother did. She served Delmar College for 28 years, but Dr. Hector never held political office. And yet, if you were running to be the President of the United States, or a Justice of the Peace, or a county court at law judge, or anything in between, county clerk, district clerk, county judge, what didn't matter, you came to Bright Street and visited Dr. Hector, because he was a man of the people. He spoke to paupers and presidents. And through all the marches and through all the organizations throughout the 50 states that the GI Forum actually had organizational bodies in, including here in Aransas County, Dr. Hector was always on a crusade for one thing and one thing only. It was pretty simple. It was guaranteed to us by our founding fathers. It was equality. And like his namesake, that great warrior Hector, he was a fighter to the end. He was just an incredible influencer in all of the nieces and nephews in his life. Because of his good work, my father became the very first Mexican-American United States attorney in the country. The first thing my father did, we talk about that influence, is he formed the first civil rights department in the United States Attorney's Office in the country. He was appointed by then President Jimmy Carter and served honorably, and in 1980 he came home. He established private practice, and in my opinion, our lives have never been the same since. All of the people, literally every one of those folks that you have photos of in your rooms, I remember them all. I remember them at Sunday brunch. I remember them at the GI Forum banquets. Irma Rangel worked in my dad's office. She was one of the very first, I think she was maybe the first Latina state representative for the House of Representatives in Texas. Now the pharmacy school in Kingsville is named after her. All of the greats passed through my life because of Dr. Hector. I saw that you had a beautiful letter from Governor Richards, who was saluting all the military letters that had been sent on behalf of the GI Forum. There were 10 women inducted to the very first Texas Women's Hall of Fame. And I remember, I think I must have been, gosh, it had to be, maybe I was a senior in high school, maybe 1984. I remember my icon was Barbara Jordan at the time. She was in the Texas Hall of Fame. I had grown up with two pictures like every other Mexicana family, Jesus Christ and President John F. Kennedy. And Bobby's was right next to my other grandmother's side of the bed. So for me, any of the Kennedys were iconic, but that also meant that LBJ was too, and so Lady Bird was also a fan. Lady Bird was inducted in that 1984 Women's Hall of Fame. And so was Dr. Clotilde Perez Garcia, an immigrant from Ciudad Victoria, Mexico, who had to walk barefoot to school when she was a girl, but rose to receive a scholarship from the great University of Texas School of Medicine in Galveston. Currently, she's in the Bob Bullock State Museum. Before she died, she gave me her medical bag. I gave it to the Texan Institute of Culture so that school children everywhere can understand that there are no obstacles as long as you can get an education. That was Dr. Hector's mantra. I wish I could share with you all the beautiful stories that I have in my heart. Why do you have to wait till you're 50-ish to figure out what a special life and gift and how blessed you were? I don't think I got it when I was 20. I can tell you that maybe you don't get anything until you're 50. But I know now what the treasures they left me, and I'm not going to waste them. So when you see me speaking out and standing strong for the things that I believe in, it's really the echo of Dr. Hector, Dr. J.A., and Dr. Cleo that you hear. When you see me advocating for others in Washington or at the state, it's really Tony Canales' blood that flows through my veins. You see, Dr. Hector, and I told you, and his siblings were all doctors except for one who was a merchant in Mexico. She stayed in Mexico. So my father, of course, wanted to be a doctor too. Dr. Hector said, "No, Tony, we cannot affect change unless you become a lawyer." The greatest civil rights cases, from desegregation of our juries to our schools to getting single member. I just sat in city council chambers this week. I sit on an MPO, and you basically get to go to behind the scenes at city council chambers. And when I walk in the room, what I see is single member district maps. We did that. The fight did that. The Crusades did that. We had our own type of revolution. And it was for what the Constitution guaranteed all of us, equality. But we've had to fight for it over time. And I want to share something with you. I thought it was over when I was in my mid-30s. I thought I had missed the greatest movement on earth, the 60s, you know? But you know what I've realized? You're always fighting for truth. You're always fighting for equality. You can never let up. The minute you do, the door shut again. And so it's more important than ever that we remember our ancestry. My story on half my side of the family is activism. I would be remiss, and I know I've probably gone over my time, but I just want to say something about my mother's side of the family. She raised, she says, 2 lions and a lamb. That was my sister and I. We were the lions. She loves my brother, her baby boy. We all became lawyers. We're all very independent and quite different. But without my strong mother, we could not have achieved all of the things that we somehow dub ourselves now successful. My measure of success is that my 5 children are happy and healthy and educated. But for others, I can tell you, who asked me, who was it? I always go back to my grandmother. But it was my grandmother that taught my mother how to be strong. My mother's family is who my grandmother Cleo wrote about. The book that I'm going to leave with you shows you that she traced her lineage back to 1567, and Baltasar de Sosa was their name. But you know their descendants more appropriately for the last name Bayi. Now, sometimes when I'm out at my Coastal Parks Division, I have to correct them. It is not Bali. It's Bayi. My grandmother, Elvira, my granny, 96 years old, is one of the oldest, I think she is the oldest living Bayi in Texas. That side of my family is who my grandmother enjoyed learning, writing, and sharing about. It was that side of the family that received the Spanish land grants that so many of you also have in your family history, that belonged and colonized and ranched all of Padre Island. The legacy that our ancestors have given to us is so rich, and it's not to be forgotten. I would really encourage you to do as much genealogy as you can and pass it on to your children. You would be surprised how much they are interested in knowing about who they are. I want to tell you that my grandmother was incredibly witty, quite funny. And she always used to say, everywhere she goes, and this happens to me too, quite often, when you're a person that gets elected in a county with 360,000 people, as hard as I try, I don't know everybody by name, even though sometimes their mayor, I'm sure you can identify, but you do your best, because sometimes the faces are so familiar. You just need a prompt to know what the connection is. But often they would come to my grandmother and they would say, and I'll say it in Spanish, I'll try to translate it in English, but they would say, Doctora, ¿recuerdas quién soy yo? Doctor, do you know who I am? And she says in Spanish, si tú no sabes quién eres, ¿cómo quieres que tú sepas que yo sepa? If you don't know who the heck you are, how do you want me to know? And I laugh and I think about her all the time. But the truth is that she wanted you to know who you are. Truly she did. And her love, she would absolutely love what you have done with this exhibition. I want you to know that I've already learned something. I've always wondered about the origin of the piñata. I just read that it actually originated possibly in China, and that it was brought to the Americas most likely because of the influence of Marco Polo, the Italian. I've always wondered about the 7 stars, which is a reference to 7 deadly sins, the triumph of good over evil. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. There is no doubt that when you make a mark like this, you have no idea the ripple effect that it will have. I intend to repeat that story many times over about the piñata. I have the privilege of getting to speak to so many different groups. This past week, I mourned the loss of our Texas Historical Commissioner. Former Texas Historical Commissioner, former daughter of the American Revolution, former daughter of the Texas Republic, former Clara Driscoll chapter president, Miss Anita Eisenhower. There was no greater grande dame in South Texas than Miss Anita. And she was at my side constantly promoting historical markers, promoting history and exhibits just like the ones you've done. You must have champions, and you must have folks to be able to pass the torch. We are at a loss in Nueces County without Miss Anita. And so there is a call to arms today that I give to you here in Aransas, and I'm calling on Nueces as well. We must learn how to bring our young generation to these types of events. I look out in the crowd and I struggle to find a millennial. I'm sure you're here and just the sun is in my eyes. If you're under 38, you're a millennial. Raise your hand. One. I was thinking you. And just so you know, really, you're on the higher end. I mean, you're in the 30s. But the point is that we have work to do. Because exhibits like this one will not continue unless we have a new generation to help nurture this. And it is more important than ever. You know, young people don't learn civics anymore. And you know what happens when you don't learn civics? You forget about those founding fathers and those principles that the Pledge of Allegiance so beautifully and eloquently and articulately says, with liberty and justice for all. And so it may seem like a beautiful exhibit on a beautiful day, similar to the way we treat so many things in Rockport. I always feel like Rockport is like epicenter for the arts. I always feel that way. And even when you lost everything, your first resurrection was that art center. Why? Why was that so important? Because it's about who you are. It's about why people come here and why they like coming here. So I just want to thank you as a citizen of South Texas for all that you do to promote the arts. And when I say the arts, it's not just the genre of painting and sculpting, and it's more than that. It's the liberal arts. It's the opening of one's mind to understand history. And if you don't teach it the right way, people learn a different form of history, an alternative form, the one that they conjugate in their mind. I was at the Bob Bullock Museum a month ago, and there was actually a woman who stood up and said that in Three Rivers, Texas, they still don't believe that Felix Longoria's family was denied the right of burial. My friends, there was a barbed wire fence, and there was a Mexican area to get buried, and an Anglo place to get buried. I have the pictures. Do you see why you're so important? Do you see that it will be erased if we don't share the truth? It is more convenient to think everything is perfect. But it is more wonderful to see things as they are. And if they are not right, as Jefferson said, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. I want to thank all of the volunteers who made today possible. I know you're about to enjoy beautiful food and music. The mariachis, my grandmother's favorite is my mother's favorite. And so when you sing it, I hope you'll remember La Doctora Los Laureles. She loved it because they were everywhere, the oleanders. And they are a beautiful flower, but they are also poisonous. She said, just like a woman. We are beautiful, but we can be treacherous. She was tough, she was strong. I want to be everything she was, but most of all, I want to do what she did for me, pass the gift. Thank you for letting me do that today, sharing a little bit about the Garcia family. Please watch that documentary, Justice for My People. It will tell you everything that you need to know. And don't think for a second that I'm the last of my line. I have 5 incredible children, and they all know where they come from. And if they don't, just like my grandmother would do to me, I will grab them by the ear and force them to sit down and read. We have so much to be proud of, and I'm thankful for all of you for sharing the beauty that is the Hispanic culture in art, in music, in dance, in our history, in our religion, and in our paintings, all of which is represented here. Estoy muy agradecida. I am very, very thankful and very blessed to be here with all of you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Judge Canales. We really appreciate it, and we're invite all of you to enjoy the mariachis.